Welcome to WooEnglish, where we teach English through captivating stories from history. In today's episode, we explore the life of Socrates, his quest for truth, his courageous stand during his trial, and the lasting impact he's had on Western thought. Our goal is to help you improve your English skills while enjoying fascinating stories like this one. If you're enjoying the journey, don't forget to like, share, and leave a comment, and subscribe for more engaging content. Let's get started. Chapter 1. The Early Years of Socrates. In the bustling, sunlit city of Athens, around the year 470 BC, a child was born. His name was Socrates. The streets of Athens were alive with energy, merchants selling their goods, children playing in the alleys, and philosophers debating in the public squares. But Socrates, he was different. While other children ran and shouted, he often sat quietly, his eyes full of curiosity, watching the world around him. From a young age, Socrates was fascinated by people, by their thoughts, their actions, their beliefs. He wondered why people did the things they did, why they believed what they believed. This curiosity would become the driving force of his life, guiding him on a path that would change the world forever. Socrates' father, Sophroniscus, was a stonemason. He worked with his hands, shaping the rough stone into beautiful, strong structures. Socrates often watched his father at work, amazed at how a simple piece of rock could be transformed into something magnificent. From his father, Socrates learned the value of hard work, precision, and patience. But unlike his father, Socrates wasn't interested in shaping stones. He wanted to shape ideas. His mother, Phanerette, was a midwife. She had the special task of helping women bring new life into the world. Socrates was deeply influenced by his mother's work. He admired how she assisted in the birth of something as miraculous as a child. This idea of helping to bring something into existence stayed with Socrates, but instead of bringing children into the world, he wanted to help people bring new thoughts and ideas to life. As Socrates grew older, his curiosity grew with him. He began to explore the city of Athens, not just with his feet, but with his mind. He would walk through the marketplace, through the temples, and along the narrow streets, talking to everyone he met. He spoke to merchants, soldiers, craftsmen, and even the beggars on the street. Socrates had a burning desire to understand the world. But more than that, he wanted to understand the human soul. His questions were endless. He asked people about their lives, their work, their beliefs. Why do you do what you do? He would ask. What makes something good or bad? What is the right way to live? These questions might seem simple, but they were powerful. And they often left people thinking deeply, sometimes even confused. Socrates' quest for understanding wasn't just about gathering information. He wasn't satisfied with just knowing the facts. He wanted to dig deeper, to find the truth that lay beneath the surface. He believed that everyone had their own wisdom, but sometimes people didn't even realize it themselves. Socrates saw it as his mission to help others discover their own inner wisdom. In those days, Athens was a city full of learning and culture. There were many great thinkers, poets, politicians, and philosophers, each with their own ideas about the world. Socrates admired these men, but he was also skeptical. He noticed that many of them spoke with great confidence, but when he asked them simple questions, their answers were often unclear, or they would contradict themselves. Socrates began to wonder, could it be that these wise men were not as wise as they seemed? This realization was the beginning of something new. Socrates started to see that true wisdom wasn't about having all the answers. It was about recognizing how much you didn't know. This idea became the heart of Socrates' philosophy. He didn't claim to have the answers. Instead, he saw himself as a guide, someone who could help others find their own truth. But Socrates' way of thinking wasn't always appreciated. His constant questioning made some people uncomfortable. They didn't like being challenged, especially by someone who didn't claim to have all the answers. Some began to see Socrates as a troublemaker, a man who disrupted the peace of Athens with his relentless questions. Yet, Socrates remained true to his path. He believed deeply in the importance of questioning, of never accepting things at face value. He believed that this was the only way to find real wisdom, to live a life that was truly meaningful. As he continued to grow and learn, Socrates developed his own way of teaching. He didn't lecture or give long speeches. Instead, he engaged people in conversation, asking them questions that made them think deeply. This method of teaching, which would later be known as the Socratic method, was not about giving people the answers. It was about helping them find the answers for themselves. Socrates' questions were like seeds. He planted them in the minds of those he spoke to, and over time, these seeds grew into new ideas, new ways of thinking. His conversations weren't always easy. Sometimes they were challenging, even uncomfortable. But Socrates believed that this discomfort was necessary. It was a sign that people were beginning to think in new ways, to see the world differently. Despite his growing reputation, Socrates remained humble. He didn't see himself as a great teacher or a wise man. He saw himself as someone who was still learning, still searching for the truth. And he believed that everyone, no matter who they were, could join him on this journey of discovery. But this journey was not without its challenges. As Socrates continued to question the people of Athens, he made enemies. Some saw his questioning as a threat, especially those in positions of power. They didn't like being challenged, and they didn't want others to start questioning them either. Socrates' relentless pursuit of truth began to stir up tensions in the city. Yet, even in the face of growing opposition, Socrates did not back down. He believed that what he was doing was important, not just for himself, but for the entire city of Athens. He saw his work as a way of helping Athens become a better, wiser city, where people didn't just follow the crowd, but thought for themselves. Socrates' early years were just the beginning of a life dedicated to the pursuit of wisdom. His curiosity, his love of questioning, and his commitment to helping others find their own truth would shape the rest of his life, and eventually change the course of history. As the years went by, Socrates would face many challenges. He would make powerful friends, and even more powerful enemies. But through it all, he would remain true to his philosophy, to his belief in the power of questioning and the search for truth. Chapter 2. The Search for Wisdom. Socrates believed that wisdom was the greatest treasure one could possess. To him, wisdom was more valuable than gold, more precious than the finest jewels. But where could it be found? This question became Socrates' lifelong quest. He sought to uncover the true nature of wisdom, but the journey would be filled with surprising discoveries. In the lively city of Athens, there were many who claimed to be wise. Poets, politicians, craftsmen. They all spoke with great confidence about their knowledge. They believed they understood the world, and many others believed them too. Socrates, however, wasn't convinced. He wanted to know for himself if these men were truly wise, or if their wisdom was just an illusion. And so, Socrates set out to meet these so-called wise men one by one. He visited the poets, those who filled Athens with beautiful words and stories. He admired their creativity and the emotions they could stir with their verses. But when Socrates asked them about the meaning behind their words, he was met with confusion. The poets could craft lovely poems, but they couldn't explain the deeper truths behind them. They wrote about love, courage, and the gods, yet they couldn't explain what these things truly meant. Socrates was puzzled. How could these men, who were so admired for their wisdom, be unable to explain their own work? He realized that while they had talent, They didn't truly understand the wisdom they seemed to express. Next, Socrates turned to the politicians. These were men of power and influence, those who made decisions for the city of Athens. They spoke in the assembly, debating laws and policies with great authority. Surely these leaders must possess wisdom, Socrates thought. But when he questioned them, he found that their knowledge was often shallow. They spoke in grand terms, but their understanding was limited. They claimed to know what was best for the people, but Socrates noticed that they couldn't explain the reasons behind their decisions. They were more concerned with winning arguments than with seeking the truth. Socrates' disappointment grew. If the poets and politicians weren't truly wise, who was? Perhaps the craftsmen, the builders, the sculptors, the people who created things with their hands held the key to wisdom. They were skilled, practical, and knew how to make things that were both useful and beautiful. Socrates admired their expertise and thought, surely they must understand something deep about life. But when Socrates spoke with the craftsmen, he found that their knowledge, too, was limited. They were experts in their trades, but beyond that, they knew little about the world. They believed that because they were skilled in one area, they were wise in all things. Yet, when Socrates asked them about the nature of justice, virtue, or the soul, they had no answers. Each encounter left Socrates with the same realization. These men, who were respected for their wisdom, didn't truly possess it. They were knowledgeable in specific areas, but they lacked a deeper understanding of life's greatest questions. This was a turning point for Socrates. He began to understand something profound, something that would become the cornerstone of his philosophy. True wisdom comes from knowing that one knows nothing. This idea was both simple and revolutionary. Socrates realized that the first step to wisdom was humility, recognizing the limits of one's own knowledge. The more he questioned others, the more he saw that most people were convinced of their own understanding, even when it was shallow or mistaken. They clung to their beliefs, unwilling to admit that they might be wrong. But Socrates was different. He didn't pretend to have the answers. Instead, he embraced the idea that he knew very little. This made him wiser than those who thought they knew everything, because he was open to learning, to exploring, and to questioning everything. Socrates didn't keep this discovery to himself. He believed it was his duty to share this insight with others, to help them see the value of questioning their own beliefs. He wandered through Athens, engaging in conversations with people from all walks of life. Whether it was a wealthy merchant, a humble farmer, or a young student, Socrates approached them with the same goal: to help them think more deeply about their own lives. This method of questioning became known as the Socratic method. It was a way of teaching that didn't involve giving answers, but rather asking the right questions. Socrates would ask simple, direct questions that led people to examine their beliefs, often revealing contradictions or flaws in their thinking. For example, if someone claimed to know what justice was, Socrates would ask them to define it. He would then question their definition, exploring its implications and testing its consistency. Often, this would lead the person to realize that their understanding was incomplete or even incorrect. Socrates didn't do this to embarrass people or to prove them wrong. He did it to help them grow, to encourage them to seek a deeper truth. But this approach wasn't always easy for people to accept. Many found Socrates' questions uncomfortable, even unsettling. It's never easy to have your beliefs challenged, to be forced to admit that you don't know as much as you thought. Some people were grateful for Socrates' guidance, seeing it as a chance to learn and grow. Others, however, became defensive, even angry. They didn't want to be questioned. They wanted to hold on to their beliefs, even if those beliefs were shaky. Socrates understood this. He knew that most people preferred the comfort of certainty to the challenge of doubt. But he also believed that true wisdom could only be found through this process of questioning, through the willingness to admit ignorance and to seek the truth, no matter how difficult it might be. And so, Socrates continued his search for wisdom, not by looking for answers, but by asking questions. He became a familiar figure in Athens, always in the marketplace or the public square, deep in conversation. Some people began to follow him, intrigued by his ideas and eager to learn from his method. These followers included some of the brightest young minds in Athens, who would later carry Socrates' teachings far beyond the city walls. But not everyone admired Socrates. His constant questioning made him enemies, especially among those who felt threatened by his challenges to their authority. Yet, Socrates never wavered. He believed that his mission was too important to abandon, even in the face of growing opposition. Socrates' search for wisdom was not just a personal journey. It was a quest that would shape the future of philosophy and education, a quest that would inspire countless others to question, to think, and to seek the truth. He showed the world that true wisdom is not about having all the answers. It's about asking the right questions and being brave enough to admit when we don't know the answers. Before we dive into Chapter 3, we want to remind you that you're listening to this story on WooEnglish. If you're enjoying this journey into the life of Socrates, don't forget to share it with your friends. Your comments and likes mean a lot to us, so please take a moment to let us know what you think. Now let's continue with Chapter 3. Chapter 3. Friends and Followers. As Socrates' fame grew in Athens, so did the number of his followers. Word spread through the city about the man who asked questions that no one else dared to ask. Questions that made people think deeply about their lives and beliefs. Young men from all over Athens, eager to learn, began to gather around Socrates. They were drawn to his wisdom, his courage, and his unique way of teaching. Among these followers were two young men who would become famous in their own right, Plato and Xenophon. Plato was a bright and passionate student, deeply influenced by Socrates' ideas. He would later become one of history's greatest philosophers, writing many dialogues that captured the essence of Socrates' teachings. Xenophon, on the other hand, was more practical and military-minded. He admired Socrates greatly and would go on to write about his life and character, preserving the memory of his beloved teacher. Socrates' method of teaching was unlike anything his followers had experienced before. He didn't give long lectures or preach from a position of authority. Instead, he engaged his students in conversation, in dialogue. He believed that true learning came not from being told what to think, but from discovering the truth for oneself. He would gather his followers in the marketplace, in the streets, or wherever they could find a quiet spot, and he would begin to ask questions. These questions were simple, but they went straight to the heart of the matter. What is justice, he might ask? Or, what does it mean to live a good life? The students would offer their answers, and Socrates would listen carefully. Then he would ask more questions, gently probing, challenging their assumptions, and pushing them to think more deeply. This method of questioning, known as the Socratic method, was powerful. It made his students reflect on their beliefs, examine their reasoning, and consider different perspectives. Sometimes they found that their original answers were incomplete or even flawed. But Socrates didn't criticize or judge them for this. Instead, he encouraged them to keep questioning, to keep seeking the truth. Socrates believed that only by questioning could one find true wisdom. He often compared himself to a midwife, helping others give birth to their own ideas. Just as his mother, Phanerette, had brought new life into the world, Socrates saw his role as helping others bring new thoughts and understandings into existence. He didn't see himself as a teacher in the traditional sense. He saw himself as a guide, leading others on their journey toward wisdom. But while Socrates' followers admired and respected him, not everyone in Athens felt the same way. His constant questioning made some people uncomfortable, especially those in power. The politicians and leaders of Athens were used to being respected and obeyed. They didn't like being challenged, especially by a man who didn't hold any official position or authority. To them, Socrates was a troublemaker. He disrupted the peace of the city with his relentless questions, making people doubt their leaders and question the status quo. The powerful men of Athens began to see Socrates as a threat, a man who was turning the youth against them, leading them to challenge the very foundations of Athenian society. But Socrates was not afraid. He believed that his mission was too important to be silenced. He saw himself as a necessary force in Athens, someone who kept the city awake and aware. He often compared himself to a gadfly, the small insect that buzzes around and bites, keeping the horse from falling asleep. Just as the gadfly keeps the horse alert, Socrates believed his questioning kept Athens from becoming complacent, from accepting things without question. However, this made him many enemies. People began to whisper about Socrates, spreading rumors and lies. They said he was corrupting the youth, leading them away from the gods and the traditions that had kept Athens strong. They accused him of being an atheist, a man who didn't respect the gods of the city. These accusations were serious, and they began to tarnish Socrates' reputation. Despite this growing opposition, Socrates continued his work. He wasn't interested in wealth or power. He didn't care about fame or fortune. All he wanted was to help others find the truth. He believed that a life without questioning was not worth living, and he lived this belief every day, even as the threats against him grew. His followers, especially Plato and Xenophon, were deeply affected by Socrates' courage. They saw a man who was willing to stand up for his beliefs, no matter the cost. They admired his commitment to the truth, even when it put him at odds with the most powerful people in Athens. Socrates became a model for them, someone who showed that true wisdom wasn't about knowing all the answers. It was about asking the right questions. But the tension in Athens continued to rise. The more Socrates questioned, the more enemies he made. His followers could see that danger was coming, that the powerful men of Athens wouldn't tolerate his challenges forever. They worried for him, but Socrates remained calm. He knew that his work was important, and he wasn't about to stop, no matter the consequences. Socrates' influence on his followers was profound. Plato, in particular, was inspired to continue the work of his teacher. After Socrates' death, Plato would go on to establish the Academy, one of the first institutions of higher learning in the Western world. There, he would teach the next generation of thinkers, passing on the lessons he had learned from Socrates. Xenophon, too, would honor his teacher's memory by writing about his life and teachings. Through these writings, the wisdom of Socrates would be preserved for future generations, allowing his ideas to live on long after his death. Socrates' life was a testament to the power of questioning, to the importance of seeking the truth, even when it's difficult, even when it's dangerous. His teachings would go on to shape Western thought in profound ways, influencing philosophers, leaders, and thinkers for centuries to come. Chapter 4. The Oracle of Delphi. One day, something extraordinary happened, something that would change the course of Socrates' life forever. It all began with a visit to the Oracle of Delphi, a sacred place where people from all over Greece went to seek advice from the gods. The oracle was believed to speak for Apollo, the god of prophecy, and her words were taken very seriously. People came to her with their deepest questions, hoping to receive guidance that would help them make important decisions. Socrates had a close friend named Chaerephon, a man who admired Socrates greatly. Chaerephon was curious about his friend's wisdom. After all, Socrates was known throughout Athens for his deep thinking and relentless questioning. But Chaerephon wanted to know something more, something that only the gods could answer. So, Chaerephon traveled to Delphi and asked the oracle a simple yet profound question. Is there anyone wiser than Socrates? The oracle's response was swift and clear. No one is wiser than Socrates. When Chaerephon returned to Athens and told Socrates what the oracle had said, everyone was shocked, including Socrates himself. How could this be true? Socrates was puzzled. He didn't see himself as wise, quite the opposite, in fact. He often spoke about how little he knew, how much he still had to learn. The idea that he was the wisest man in the world seemed impossible to him. Socrates could have boasted about the oracle's words, using them to elevate his status in Athens. But that wasn't who Socrates was. Instead, he decided to investigate, to test the oracle's words. He wanted to understand what they really meant. And so, his search for wisdom took on a new dimension. Socrates began by returning to the people he had already questioned, the poets, the politicians, the craftsmen. He asked them the same kinds of questions he always had, trying to uncover the truth about their wisdom. Each time, he hoped to find someone who was truly wise, someone who could prove the oracle wrong. But each time, he was disappointed. The poets, for all their beautiful words, couldn't explain the meaning behind their verses. The politicians, for all their power and influence, couldn't justify their decisions with true understanding. The craftsmen, for all their skill, couldn't see beyond their own narrow expertise. The more Socrates questioned, the more he realized that these men, who were supposed to be wise, were not wise at all. They believed they knew much, but in reality, they knew very little. It was during these conversations that Socrates began to see the deeper meaning behind the oracle's words. He realized that true wisdom wasn't about having all the answers or being able to explain everything. It wasn't about knowledge in the traditional sense. It was about understanding the limits of that knowledge. Socrates began to see that what set him apart from others was not that he knew more than anyone else, but that he was aware of how much he didn't know. He was willing to admit his ignorance, to question his own beliefs, and to keep searching for the truth, even when it was difficult or uncomfortable. This, he realized, was the key to wisdom. The oracle's message was not about Socrates being the smartest man in Athens. It was about him being the most aware of his own limitations, the most humble in the face of the vastness of what he didn't know. Socrates' wisdom lay in his recognition that human knowledge is limited, and that true wisdom comes from accepting this and continuing to seek the truth. This realization only deepened Socrates' commitment to his life's work. He saw it as his duty to continue questioning, to continue helping others see the flaws in their own thinking, and to guide them toward a deeper understanding. He believed that by doing this, he was fulfilling a divine mission, one that had been confirmed by the Oracle of Delphi. But this realization also came with a heavy burden. Socrates knew that many people would not welcome his questions. They would not want to be shown that their wisdom was incomplete or that their beliefs were flawed. Yet, Socrates felt he had no choice. The oracle had spoken, and he had to follow the path that had been laid out for him. As Socrates continued his questioning, his reputation grew. More and more people came to hear him speak, to engage in dialogue with him, to challenge their own thinking. His followers, including Plato and Xenophon, watched in awe as Socrates fearlessly pursued the truth, no matter where it led. They saw in him a man who was committed to something greater than himself, a man who was driven by a deep sense of duty to the truth. But not everyone was pleased with Socrates' mission. The more he questioned, the more enemies he made. Those in power especially began to see him as a threat. They didn't like being challenged. They didn't like the way Socrates made them. And others questioned the very foundations of their beliefs and their authority. Despite this growing opposition, Socrates remained steadfast. He believed that the pursuit of wisdom was worth any price, even if it meant making powerful enemies. He saw his work as a service to Athens, a way of helping the city grow wiser and stronger. He was like a doctor, diagnosing the city's ills and offering a cure, even if the medicine was bitter. Socrates' understanding of the oracle's words gave him a sense of purpose that was unshakable. He knew that he might face serious consequences for his actions, but he was prepared to accept them. His commitment to the truth was stronger than his fear of what might happen to him. And so, Socrates continued on his path, questioning, challenging, and seeking wisdom. He knew that he was not truly the wisest man in Athens in the traditional sense, but he understood that his awareness of his own ignorance made him wiser than those who believed they knew it all. The oracle of Delphi's message had given Socrates a new clarity and determination. He saw that his role in Athens was not just to question others, but to help them see the importance of questioning themselves. He wanted to help people realize that true wisdom comes not from knowing everything, but from understanding how much there is still to learn. As Socrates walked through the streets of Athens, engaging in dialogue with everyone he met, he carried with him the words of the oracle. They were a reminder of the path he had chosen and of the mission he was destined to fulfill. But Socrates knew that this path would not be easy. The opposition against him was growing stronger, and the threats to his life were becoming more real. Yet, he was determined to continue, to follow the path of wisdom, no matter where it led, even if it led to his ultimate fate. Chapter 5. The Growing Tension. As Socrates' influence in Athens grew, so did the number of his enemies. His reputation as a relentless questioner, a man who challenged the very foundations of belief, spread throughout the city. But with this fame came suspicion and fear. Many in Athens began to whisper that Socrates was dangerous, that his ideas were corrupting the minds of the youth and undermining the traditions that held the city together. The accusations against Socrates began to grow louder. People said he was spreading doubt about the gods, the very deities that Athens revered and worshipped. In a city where religion and tradition were deeply intertwined with daily life, these were serious charges. To question the gods was to question the city's very identity, and that was something many Athenians could not accept. Socrates, however, was not afraid. He believed deeply in what he was doing. For him, the pursuit of truth was not just a personal mission, it was a public duty. He saw Athens as a city that prided itself on wisdom and learning, and he believed that his work was essential for the well-being of the city. He wanted to make Athens a better, wiser place, where people didn't just follow tradition blindly, but thought deeply about the world and their place in it. But this mission put him at odds with the powerful, the wealthy, and the self-righteous. Socrates wasn't afraid to challenge those in positions of authority. He questioned politicians who were used to having their words accepted without doubt. He challenged the wealthy who believed that their money and status gave them wisdom. And he confronted the self-righteous, who were certain that their way of life was the only correct one. In doing so, Socrates made many enemies. These were not just ordinary citizens, but influential people who held power in Athens. They didn't like being questioned, especially not by someone like Socrates, who didn't hold any official position and who seemed to care little for wealth or status. To them, Socrates was a threat, a man who was stirring up trouble and making people question the very structures that kept society stable. The tension in the city began to rise. People who once admired Socrates' wisdom now started to view him with suspicion. They wondered if he was leading Athens down a dangerous path, one where tradition and the gods were no longer respected. Rumors began to spread, fueled by those who wanted to see Socrates silenced. But Socrates remained calm. He knew that the path he had chosen was not an easy one. He understood that by questioning the powerful, he was putting himself in danger. but he believed that the pursuit of truth was worth any price, even if that price was his own life. Socrates often spoke about how important it was to live a virtuous life, a life guided by reason and the pursuit of truth. For him, this was more important than anything else, even more important than life itself. He believed that if he stopped questioning, if he stopped challenging the people of Athens to think more deeply, he would be betraying his own principles. And that was something he could never do. Despite the growing tension, Socrates continued his work. He walked the streets of Athens, engaged in dialogue with anyone who would listen. He questioned, he probed, he challenged. He didn't do this to make people uncomfortable or to stir up trouble. He did it because he believed that this was the only way for people to grow, to become wiser, to live better lives. But the more Socrates questioned, the more enemies he made. Some of the most powerful men in Athens began to see him not just as a nuisance, but as a real threat to their power. They started to talk about how dangerous Socrates was, how he was corrupting the youth with his strange ideas, how he was leading people away from the gods. These accusations were serious. In Athens, religion was a central part of life, and to be accused of disrespecting the gods was a grave offense. Socrates knew this, but he refused to stop. He believed that questioning the nature of the gods and the beliefs that people held about them was not an act of disrespect. It was a way of seeking deeper understanding, of finding a truth that was more than just tradition. But this was not how many Athenians saw it. They believed that Socrates was a dangerous man, someone who was spreading doubt and confusion among the people. They began to talk about how something needed to be done, how Socrates needed to be stopped. The tension continued to build, but Socrates remained unshaken. He trusted in his method, in the belief that the pursuit of truth was the highest goal a person could have. He knew that this path might lead to danger, but he was prepared to face it. For Socrates, there was no greater honor than to live, and if necessary, to die for the truth. As the opposition against him grew, some of Socrates' friends and followers began to worry. They saw the storm that was gathering, and they feared for his safety. They urged him to be more careful, to maybe soften his approach, to avoid angering the powerful. But Socrates refused. He believed that compromising his principles, even to save his own life, would be the worst betrayal of all. Socrates often spoke of the importance of staying true to one's principles, no matter the cost. He believed that a person's integrity was more valuable than anything else, and that to live without integrity was not to live at all. This belief gave him the strength to continue, even as the threats against him became more real, more dangerous. As the days passed, the tension in Athens grew stronger. People whispered in the streets about Socrates, about what should be done with him. The powerful men who saw him as a threat began to plan. They wanted to silence Socrates, to stop his questioning once and for all. But Socrates continued on, calm and unafraid. He knew that he was walking a dangerous path, but he believed it was the right one. He trusted in his mission, in the belief that the pursuit of truth was worth any price, even if that price was his own life. Chapter 6. The trial begins. And then, one day, the inevitable happened. Socrates was brought to trial. The charges against him were serious: corrupting the youth of Athens and impiety, disrespecting the gods. His accusers claimed that Socrates was a dangerous man, a man who led others astray with his constant questioning and unconventional ideas. They said he was undermining the moral fabric of Athens, turning the youth against their elders, and leading them away from the gods who protected the city. Socrates was brought before a jury of 500 Athenian citizens. It was a large and diverse group representing all parts of society. As Socrates stood before them, he was not afraid. He saw this trial not as a threat, but as another opportunity to teach, to share his ideas, and to defend the life he had chosen to live. With calm and measured words, Socrates began his defense. He explained that his questioning was not an attack on the city or the gods, but a search for truth and wisdom. He told the jury that he had never claimed to have all the answers, only that he was on a journey to discover them. He spoke about his mission to help others find their own truth, to encourage them to think for themselves and to live virtuous lives. Socrates did not beg for mercy. He did not try to flatter the jury or play on their emotions. Instead, he spoke with the same honesty and integrity that had guided his life. He told them that if they condemned him for his questioning, they would be harming themselves more than him, for they would be silencing a voice that was dedicated to helping Athens become wiser and better. But the jury was not convinced. Many were angered by Socrates' boldness, by his refusal to beg for his life, and by his unwavering commitment to his beliefs. They saw him as arrogant, as a man who thought himself above the laws and traditions of Athens. They wanted him to stop, to be silent. After hearing the arguments, the jury deliberated. When they returned, they delivered their verdict. Socrates was found guilty. The punishment for his crimes? Death. But even in the face of this terrible sentence, Socrates remained calm. He was given the chance to propose an alternative punishment, something less severe. Many expected him to suggest exile, to leave Athens and live out his days in another city. But Socrates, in his characteristic way, surprised everyone. He suggested that, as a reward for his service to the city, he should be given free meals for the rest of his life. The jury was outraged. They saw this as an act of defiance, and when they voted on the punishment, the majority chose death. Socrates accepted their decision with grace. He knew that his time had come, but he did not fear death. For Socrates, death was just another part of the journey, another step in the search for truth. He had lived his life according to his principles, and now he would die for them. Chapter 7. The Verdict. The moment had finally arrived. The jury, composed of 500 Athenian citizens, had listened to the arguments, the accusations, and Socrates' defense. They had heard him speak with clarity and conviction, explaining his life's mission, his dedication to truth, and his refusal to compromise his principles. But now it was time for them to decide his fate. The air in the courtroom was thick with tension. The jurors deliberated, their faces a mix of contemplation and unease. The people of Athens waited anxiously, knowing that the decision would not just determine the fate of one man, but would reflect the values and soul of their city. Finally, the jury returned, and the verdict was announced. Socrates was found guilty. The words hung in the air like a dark cloud. Socrates' followers, those who had admired and learned from him, felt a heavy weight settle in their hearts. How could the city that prided itself on wisdom and justice condemn a man whose only crime was to seek the truth? But the decision had been made, and the punishment for his crimes? Death. Despite the gravity of the sentence, Socrates remained calm, almost serene. There was no fear in his eyes, no pleading in his voice. He accepted the jury's verdict with the same composure he had shown throughout his trial. For Socrates, this was not a moment of defeat, but rather a continuation of his journey, a journey that he had always known might lead to this very moment. After the verdict was read, Socrates was given the opportunity to propose an alternative punishment, something less severe than death. Many in the courtroom expected him to suggest exile, to leave Athens and live out the rest of his days in another city. This was the usual course for someone in his position, and it would have been an easy way for him to avoid the ultimate penalty. But Socrates was not like other men. Instead of suggesting exile, he proposed something shocking, something that left the courtroom in stunned silence. Socrates calmly suggested that, as a reward for his service to the city, He should be given free meals for the rest of his life. The room erupted in disbelief. How could he, a man condemned by the city, suggest that he be treated like a hero, like an Olympic champion? The jury, already angered by his defiance during the trial, was now outraged. They saw this proposal not as a serious suggestion, but as an act of mockery, a challenge to their authority and the gravity of the situation. For Socrates, however, this was not mockery. It was a statement of his belief in the value of his work. He genuinely believed that what he had done for Athens was a service, that by questioning and challenging the people, he had helped them become wiser, more thoughtful citizens. In his eyes, he had dedicated his life to the betterment of the city, and that was worth something, perhaps even more than what was usually given to those who won athletic contests. But the jury didn't see it that way. They felt insulted, their pride wounded by Socrates' suggestion. When it came time to vote on his punishment, the majority chose death. Socrates accepted this decision with the same unwavering calm that had defined his entire life. He did not plead for mercy, nor did he express regret. Instead, he spoke to the jury one last time, his voice steady, his words measured. He told them that he was not afraid of death. To fear death, he said, would be to claim knowledge that no one possessed. After all, who among them knew what came after death? Who could say with certainty that death was something to be feared? For all they knew, death could be a blessing, a release from the trials of life, a journey to a place where true wisdom could be found. Socrates reminded the jury that his entire life had been devoted to the search for truth, and that this search would continue even in death. He believed that the soul was immortal, and that in death he would finally be free to continue his questioning without the constraints of the physical world. To him, death was not an end but a beginning, a new chapter in his pursuit of wisdom. As he spoke, some members of the jury and the audience were moved by his words. They saw in Socrates a man who was truly unafraid, a man who lived according to his principles and who would die for them. But others remained unmoved, their hearts hardened by the belief that Socrates was a dangerous influence, someone who needed to be silenced for the good of the city. Socrates knew that his fate was sealed, but he was at peace with it. He had lived a life of integrity, and he was ready to face whatever came next. He thanked the jury for listening to him, even if they disagreed with him, and he expressed no bitterness or anger toward those who had condemned him. In his final moments before leaving the courtroom, Socrates spoke directly to his followers and friends. He encouraged them to continue seeking the truth, to question everything, and to live lives of virtue and integrity. He told them that his death should not be seen as a tragedy, but as a natural conclusion to the life he had chosen to live. He urged them to carry on his work, to keep the spirit of questioning alive in Athens and beyond. As he was led away, Socrates' friends and followers were filled with a mix of sorrow and admiration. They knew that they were witnessing the end of an era, the loss of a man who had changed their lives and the way they thought about the world. But they also knew that Socrates' ideas would not die with him. They would live on in the hearts and minds of those who had learned from him, and in the generations that would follow. Socrates' verdict was not just a verdict on one man. It was a reflection of the tensions and fears that gripped Athens at that time. The city was changing, and Socrates had been a catalyst for that change. His questioning had challenged the status quo, and in the end, it had cost him his life. But Socrates had always known that the pursuit of truth came with risks, and he had been willing to accept those risks in order to stay true to himself. As Socrates walked away from the courtroom, his head held high, he left behind a legacy that would resonate through the ages. His life, his philosophy, and his unwavering commitment to the truth would continue to inspire countless others to ask the most important questions of all. What is the good life? How should we live? Chapter 8. The Last Days. The days following Socrates' trial were heavy with the weight of finality. Athens, once the vibrant city where Socrates had walked and talked with its people, now felt like a place of shadows and silence. Socrates had been sentenced to death, and there was no turning back. Yet, even in the face of this grim reality, Socrates remained unshaken. Socrates spent his last days in a small, dimly lit prison cell. The stone walls were cold and bare, a stark contrast to the life he had lived filled with vibrant discussions and deep thinking. But Socrates did not despair. He knew that this was where his journey would end, and he accepted it with grace. His friends and followers came to visit him often. They crowded into the small cell, their faces etched with worry and sorrow. Among them were his most devoted students, Plato, Crito, and others who had been deeply influenced by his teachings. They could not bear the thought of losing their beloved teacher, and they pleaded with him to escape. "Socrates, we can get you out of here," Crito whispered urgently one evening, leaning close to his mentor. "We have the means to bribe the guards. You could flee Athens, live in exile, and continue your work in another city. You don't have to die." But Socrates, calm and unwavering, gently shook his head. "My dear Crito," he replied, "I have lived my entire life according to my principles. How can I abandon them now, at the very end? It is not just the laws of Athens that I must obey, but the moral laws that guide my soul." His words were simple, yet they carried the weight of a lifetime of thought and conviction. Socrates believed that to escape would be to betray everything he stood for. He had always taught that one must live a virtuous life, a life in accordance with reason and justice. To flee would be to act out of fear, to place his own life above the laws and the community he had always served. "But the laws have condemned you unjustly," Crito insisted, his voice filled with emotion. "They do not deserve your obedience." Socrates smiled gently, his eyes filled with a deep, calm understanding. "If I were to break the laws now, what would that teach? That it is acceptable to disobey the law whenever it is inconvenient or when we believe it is wrong? No, my friend. Even if the law is flawed, we must respect it. For if we do not, what hope is there for the city? The law must be above personal interest." His friends were deeply moved by his words. They saw in Socrates a man who was not just wise, but who lived his wisdom every day. Even now, when it would be so easy to act out of fear or anger. Socrates was teaching them with his actions, showing them the true meaning of integrity. In these final days, Socrates continued to teach, turning his prison cell into a place of learning. He spoke about the nature of the soul, the possibility of an afterlife, and the importance of living a life of virtue. His voice was calm and steady, even as the shadows of death crept closer. "Do not fear death," he told his friends, "for death is simply a change, a transition. The soul is immortal, and it may be that in death we will find a greater truth, a deeper wisdom than we could ever discover in this life." Socrates spoke of death as a natural part of life, something not to be feared but to be accepted with dignity. He believed that the soul would continue on its journey after death, seeking the truth in a way that was not possible in the physical world. This belief gave him comfort, and he shared it with his friends to ease their sorrow. His courage and wisdom in these final moments deeply affected everyone in the room. They saw a man who was truly at peace with himself, who had lived a life of purpose, and who was now facing death with the same calm resolve that had guided him throughout his life. One evening, as the day of his execution drew near, Socrates spoke to his followers about the importance of living a virtuous life. "A life without examination is not worth living," he said, his voice filled with the passion that had inspired so many. "We must always question, always seek the truth. We must strive to live in a way that honors our soul, our community, and the truth itself." His followers listened intently, their hearts heavy with the knowledge that these were some of the last words they would ever hear from their teacher. Yet, even in their sorrow, they found inspiration in his words. Socrates was showing them how to live and how to die with grace, wisdom, and unwavering commitment to one's principles. As the night grew late, the conversations in the small cell began to quiet. Socrates' friends sat in silence, absorbing the depth of what they had heard. They knew that they were witnessing something extraordinary, a man who was facing the end of his life with absolute integrity, who was teaching them not just through words, but through his actions. The day of Socrates' execution arrived, and with it, a somber stillness settled over the city. His friends and followers gathered one last time in the prison cell, their hearts heavy with grief. The cup of hemlock poison was brought to Socrates, the final act in a tragic drama that had played out over the last few weeks. But Socrates, as always, remained calm. He took the cup in his hands, his movements steady and deliberate. He looked at his friends, his expression filled with warmth and reassurance. "Do not weep for me," he said softly, "for I go to meet whatever awaits me with a clear conscience, knowing that I have lived my life as I believed was right." With those words, Socrates drank the hemlock, his hand steady, his resolve unbroken. His friends watched in sorrow as the poison began to take effect, but Socrates remained at peace. He lay down, his body slowly succumbing to the poison, but his mind as sharp and clear as ever. As his breathing slowed, Socrates spoke his final words, a simple request that his friends fulfill a debt he had left unpaid. It was a small, mundane detail, but it was a reminder of Socrates' deep commitment to living a life of responsibility and integrity, even in the face of death. And then, he was gone. The room was silent, the air heavy with the loss of a great soul. But in that silence, there was also a sense of peace, a recognition that Socrates had lived and died according to the principles he had always held dear. Socrates' death marked the end of a life dedicated to the pursuit of truth, but it was also the beginning of a legacy that would echo through the ages. His teachings, his courage, and his unwavering commitment to his principles would continue to inspire generations of thinkers, philosophers, and ordinary people seeking to live a life of meaning and virtue. Chapter 9. The Hemlock. The moment that everyone had dreaded was finally here. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the prison cell where Socrates sat, surrounded by his closest friends and followers. The room was filled with a heavy silence, broken only by the occasional sob or sniffle from those who loved him dearly. They knew that this would be their last moments with their beloved teacher. The guard entered the room, holding a simple wooden cup filled with a deadly potion, hemlock, the poison that would end Socrates' life. The cup seemed small and ordinary, but its contents held the power to take away the man who had shaped so many minds, who had challenged the city of Athens to think, to question, to seek the truth. Socrates looked up as the cup was handed to him. His eyes were calm, his expression serene. There was no fear, no hesitation. He took the cup in his hands, the wood cool against his skin, and he looked at his friends one last time. Their faces were etched with sorrow, their eyes pleading with him to somehow change his mind, to find a way out of this cruel fate. But Socrates had already made his peace. "Do not be afraid," Socrates said softly, his voice gentle yet firm. "Death is but a passage, a transition to another state of being. I have lived my life in pursuit of the truth, and now I meet my end with the same commitment." He raised the cup to his lips, pausing for just a moment as if to savor the weight of this final act. Then, without hesitation, he drank the hemlock. The liquid was bitter, its taste harsh, but Socrates drank it down without flinching. His friends watched in sorrow as he consumed the deadly poison, knowing that with each swallow, they were losing him. When the cup was empty, Socrates handed it back to the guard and lay down on the small bed in the corner of the cell. His movements were slow, deliberate, as though he was preparing himself for sleep rather than death. His friends gathered around him, their hearts breaking, but Socrates remained composed. The poison began to work its way through his body, starting with his legs. He felt a cold numbness creeping up from his feet, spreading slowly but steadily. But even as the poison took hold, Socrates continued to speak, his voice steady, his words clear. "Remember," he said, "that death is not to be feared. It is simply a part of life, a natural process that we all must face. I go now to a place where perhaps greater wisdom awaits, where the soul can continue its journey in search of truth." His friends wept quietly, their tears falling like rain onto the cold stone floor. They knew that they were witnessing something extraordinary, an act of profound courage, of unwavering commitment to one's beliefs. Socrates, the man who had taught them so much, was teaching them one final lesson: how to face death with dignity and grace. As the numbness reached his chest, Socrates' breathing became shallower, but he remained calm. He looked around at his friends, his eyes filled with warmth and understanding. He knew that they were grieving, but he wanted to offer them some comfort, some small token of peace. With a final effort, Socrates spoke his last words. "Crito," he said, addressing his loyal friend, "we owe a rooster to Asclepius. Please, do not forget to pay the debt." Asclepius was the god of healing, and Socrates' request was a symbol of his belief that death was a kind of healing, a release from the body and the beginning of a new journey for the soul. It was a simple request, but it carried a profound meaning, a reminder that even in death, Socrates remained true to his principles, his beliefs, and his sense of duty. Crito, his heart breaking, nodded and promised to fulfill Socrates' final wish. The words hung in the air, a poignant reminder of the man who had lived his life with such integrity, such commitment to the truth. And then, with those final words, Socrates closed his eyes. The poison had done its work, and his body began to shut down. But there was no struggle, no fear, only a peaceful acceptance of what was to come. His breathing slowed, becoming softer and softer until finally it stopped altogether. The room was silent, the air thick with grief and reverence. Socrates' friends and followers stood around him, their hearts heavy with the loss of the man who had been their teacher, their guide, their friend. Athens had lost one of its greatest minds, one of its most courageous souls. But even in death, Socrates' influence would not fade. The lessons he had taught, the questions he had asked, the challenges he had posed, they would live on in the hearts and minds of those who had known him, and in the generations that would follow. As the sun set over Athens that evening, the city was left to grapple with the loss of one of its most extraordinary citizens. Socrates' death was a moment of profound sorrow, but it was also a moment of profound significance. He had shown the world what it meant to live and die with integrity, with courage, with an unwavering commitment to the pursuit of truth. And so, Socrates passed from this life to whatever lay beyond, leaving behind a legacy that would shape the course of Western thought for centuries to come. His death was not an end, but a beginning of a new chapter in the story of philosophy, of wisdom, of the eternal quest for understanding. As his friends left the prison that night, their hearts heavy with grief, they knew that they had witnessed something remarkable. Socrates was gone, but his spirit, his teachings, and his unwavering commitment to the truth would continue to inspire and guide them for the rest of their lives. Chapter 10. The Legacy. Socrates' death was meant to silence him, to end the questioning, the challenges, the disruption he caused in the heart of Athens. But instead, it did the opposite. His passing marked the beginning of something far greater, something that would resonate through the ages and shape the very foundation of Western thought. In the days following Socrates' death, Athens was filled with a sense of loss. His friends and followers, though heartbroken, knew that they could not let his ideas die with him. They gathered together, sharing memories of his teachings, his questions, and the wisdom he had imparted. Among them was Plato, a young man who had been profoundly influenced by Socrates. Plato knew that his teacher's ideas were too important to be forgotten, too powerful to fade away. Determined to preserve Socrates' legacy, Plato began to write. He recorded the conversations he had with Socrates, the dialogues that had taken place in the streets, the marketplaces, and the homes of Athens. Through these writings, Plato captured the essence of Socrates' philosophy, the relentless pursuit of truth, the deep commitment to questioning, and the belief that true wisdom comes from recognizing one's own ignorance. Plato's dialogues brought Socrates to life on the page, allowing future generations to witness the brilliance of his mind, the sharpness of his wit, and the depth of his character. In these dialogues, Socrates continued to ask his probing questions, to challenge assumptions, to guide others toward deeper understanding. Plato's work ensured that Socrates' voice would never be silenced, that his ideas would continue to inspire and provoke thought long after his death. One of the most enduring contributions of Socrates was his method of questioning, now known as the Socratic method. This approach, which involved asking a series of questions to help someone arrive at a deeper understanding, became a foundational tool in education, law, and philosophy. The Socratic method was not just about finding answers. It was about exploring the complexity of ideas, uncovering contradictions, and pushing the boundaries of knowledge. In classrooms around the world, teachers use the Socratic method to engage students in critical thinking. Instead of simply giving answers, they ask questions, encouraging students to think for themselves, to explore different perspectives, and to develop their own understanding. This method has been instrumental in shaping the way we learn, fostering a spirit of inquiry and a commitment to the pursuit of truth. But Socrates' influence extends far beyond the classroom. His ideas have shaped the way we think about justice, ethics, and the nature of knowledge itself. His belief that wisdom comes from recognizing one's own ignorance has inspired countless philosophers, thinkers, and leaders throughout history. Socrates taught us that true wisdom is not about having all the answers, but about being open to learning, questioning, and growing. In the field of law, the Socratic method is used to train lawyers to think critically and to examine the strengths and weaknesses of an argument. By asking probing questions, lawyers are taught to anticipate counterarguments, to consider different angles, and to develop a deeper understanding of the law. This method, rooted in Socrates' approach to dialogue, has become a cornerstone of legal education, shaping the way justice is pursued in courtrooms around the world. Socrates' influence can also be seen in the development of democratic societies. His belief in the importance of questioning authority, of challenging the status quo, has inspired movements for justice and equality throughout history. Socrates taught us that it is not only our right, but our duty to question those in power, to seek the truth, and to hold leaders accountable for their actions. This spirit of inquiry and resistance to tyranny has played a crucial role in the development of democratic principles and the protection of human rights. Although Socrates never wrote a single word, his influence is felt even today, in every classroom, in every debate, and in every search for truth. His ideas have become a part of the fabric of Western thought, woven into the very way we think about the world and our place in it. Socrates' legacy is not just about the ideas he shared, but about the way he lived his life. He showed us that it is possible to live with integrity, to stand by one's principles even in the face of great opposition. He taught us that a life devoted to the pursuit of truth, to the questioning of our own beliefs, is a life worth living. Socrates lived and died for these beliefs, and in doing so, he became a model for all those who seek to live a life of purpose and meaning. Even though Socrates was condemned by his city, his legacy has outlasted the walls of Athens. His ideas have traveled across time and space, influencing thinkers from every corner of the world. From the great philosophers of ancient Greece to the scholars of the Renaissance, from the Enlightenment thinkers to modern-day intellectuals, Socrates' spirit of inquiry continues to inspire. Today, we live in a world where information is more accessible than ever before. But Socrates reminds us that true wisdom is not about the accumulation of knowledge. It's about understanding our own limitations, questioning what we think we know, and being open to new ideas. His teachings encourage us to look beyond the surface, to dig deeper, and to never stop asking questions. Socrates' legacy is a testament to the power of ideas. It shows us that even in the face of death, ideas can endure, grow, and change the world. Socrates may have been just one man, but his influence has been profound. His commitment to the pursuit of truth, his willingness to question everything, and his unwavering belief in the importance of living a virtuous life have left an indelible mark on history. As we reflect on the life and legacy of Socrates, we are reminded of the importance of courage, integrity, and the relentless pursuit of wisdom. His life was a journey that did not end with his death, but continues to inspire and guide us today. Chapter 11. The Impact on Western Thought. Socrates' life was short, but his influence has been profound. His ideas laid the groundwork for Western philosophy, setting the stage for centuries of thought, debate, and discovery. The simple act of questioning, of seeking the truth through reason and dialogue, became the cornerstone of an intellectual tradition that would shape the entire Western world. At the heart of Socrates' philosophy was a deep commitment to reason. He believed that every person had the capacity to think, to question, and to understand the world around them. For Socrates, reason was the path to wisdom, the key to living a virtuous and meaningful life. His insistence on using reason to explore complex questions about morality, justice, and the nature of existence challenged people to look beyond tradition and authority, to think for themselves. Socrates' emphasis on ethics was another crucial element of his philosophy. He believed that living a good life was not just about following rules or traditions, but about examining one's own beliefs and actions. He taught that ethics was not something that could be dictated by others. It was something each person had to discover through reflection and dialogue. This idea, that we must all take responsibility for our own moral choices, was revolutionary and has had a lasting impact on how we think about ethics today. But perhaps the most powerful aspect of Socrates' legacy is his method of questioning, known as the Socratic method. This method, which involves asking a series of questions to explore ideas and uncover underlying assumptions, became a fundamental tool in philosophy, education, and law. Socrates showed that through dialogue and critical thinking, we can arrive at deeper truths, that by challenging our own beliefs and those of others, we can move closer to understanding the complexities of the world. Socrates didn't just influence his immediate followers. His ideas became the foundation for the entire Western intellectual tradition. His most famous student, Plato, carried Socrates' teachings forward, preserving them in his written dialogues. Plato's work, in turn, influenced another great philosopher, Aristotle, who expanded on these ideas and developed them into comprehensive systems of thought that would shape philosophy, science, and politics for centuries. In ethics, Socrates' belief that virtue is tied to knowledge, that to know the good is to do the good, was a starting point for countless philosophical debates. Plato and Aristotle, each in their way, built on this foundation, exploring the nature of virtue, happiness, and the good life. These ideas would go on to influence Christian theology, Renaissance humanism, and modern moral philosophy, shaping how we understand ethics in both personal and societal contexts. In politics, Socrates' emphasis on reason and dialogue became central to the development of democratic societies. His belief in the importance of questioning authority, of holding leaders accountable, and of engaging in open debate became key principles in democratic thought. The idea that a society should be built on reasoned debate, where every voice has the opportunity to be heard, can be traced back to the dialogues Socrates initiated on the streets of Athens. The impact of Socrates' ideas can be seen in the development of the scientific method as well. His insistence on questioning, on not taking things at face value, laid the groundwork for a way of thinking that would lead to the scientific revolution. The process of forming hypotheses, testing them through experimentation, and questioning the results is deeply rooted in the Socratic tradition of inquiry. In education, the Socratic method continues to be a powerful tool for teaching and learning. It encourages students to engage deeply with the material, to think critically, and to develop their understanding through dialogue. In classrooms around the world, teachers use this method to help students explore complex ideas, to challenge their assumptions, and to grow intellectually. The Socratic method fosters a spirit of inquiry that is essential for lifelong learning. Socrates' influence extends to the realm of law as well. In legal education, the Socratic method is used to train lawyers to think critically about the law, to examine cases from multiple perspectives, and to develop strong, reasoned arguments. This method of teaching helps future lawyers understand that the law is not just a set of rules, but a living system that requires constant examination and interpretation. But Socrates' legacy is not just about the methods and ideas he introduced. It's also about the example he set with his life and death. Socrates' willingness to stand up for his beliefs, even in the face of great opposition, serves as a powerful reminder of the importance of integrity and courage. He showed that a life devoted to the pursuit of truth is a life worth living, even if it means making great sacrifices. Socrates' trial and execution were tragic, but they also highlighted the dangers of suppressing free thought and open debate. His death became a symbol of the struggle between truth and power, between the individual's right to question and the state's desire for control. This struggle has played out many times throughout history, and Socrates' example continues to inspire those who fight for freedom of thought and expression. In modern times, Socrates' ideas about reason, ethics, and the pursuit of truth continue to resonate. His philosophy has influenced thinkers from diverse fields, philosophers, scientists, educators, and political leaders, each drawing on his ideas to address the challenges of their time. The principles that Socrates championed have become foundational to the way we think about knowledge, justice, and human rights. Today, Socrates' influence is felt in every classroom where students are encouraged to think critically, in every courtroom where justice is pursued through reasoned argument, and in every democratic society where citizens are free to question their leaders. His legacy lives on in the ongoing search for truth, in the commitment to living a virtuous life, and in the courage to stand up for what is right, even when it is difficult. Socrates' impact on Western thought is immeasurable. His ideas laid the foundation for centuries of intellectual exploration, and his methods continue to shape the way we think, learn, and understand the world. His life, marked by his unwavering commitment to the pursuit of truth, serves as a beacon for all who seek to live with integrity and purpose. As we reflect on the life and legacy of Socrates, we are reminded of the power of ideas, the importance of questioning, and the enduring value of wisdom. Socrates may have lived over 2,000 years ago, but his influence is as alive today as it was in ancient Athens. He showed us that the search for truth is a journey worth taking, a journey that continues to inspire and challenge us to this day. And so, the story of Socrates is not just a story of one man, It is the story of the birth of philosophy, the beginning of a tradition that would shape the course of history and continue to influence the way we think, live, and seek understanding in the world around us. Chapter 12. The Eternal Questioner. Socrates' legacy is not just in the words he spoke or the ideas he shared. It is in the spirit of inquiry he embodied throughout his life. He taught us that the true essence of wisdom is found in the questions we ask, not the answers we hold. His life was a testament to the power of questioning, a reminder that we must never stop seeking the truth, no matter where that search might lead us. From the bustling streets of ancient Athens to the quiet corners of today's classrooms, the spirit of Socrates lives on. He is remembered not just as a philosopher, but as a symbol of the relentless pursuit of knowledge. His method of questioning, asking what is justice or what is virtue, was never about finding simple answers. Instead, it was about pushing deeper, challenging assumptions, and refusing to settle for easy solutions. Socrates believed that life's greatest questions about morality, purpose, and the nature of existence could not be answered once and for all. Instead, they required continuous exploration, a journey of the mind that never truly ends. He taught that the most important thing we can do is to keep questioning, to never be satisfied with the surface, and to always strive for a deeper understanding of ourselves and the world around us. But Socrates' legacy is more than just a method of thinking. It's a way of living. His life challenges us to look within, to question our own beliefs, and to examine the principles that guide our actions. He showed us that wisdom is not about knowing all the answers, but about being aware of our own ignorance, recognizing that there is always more to learn, more to discover. In every age, Socrates' story has found new relevance. In times of turmoil and uncertainty, his example reminds us of the importance of staying true to our principles, even when the world around us is changing. His courage in the face of opposition, his willingness to stand up for what he believed in, even at the cost of his life, serves as a powerful reminder of the value of integrity. Socrates' story is a timeless one, a story of wisdom, courage, and the enduring power of the human mind. It is a story that resonates across centuries, inspiring countless generations to think more deeply, to question more boldly, and to seek the truth with all their hearts. The questions he posed to Athens long ago still echo today, as relevant now as they were then. What is the good life? How should we live? These are the questions that Socrates left us with, questions that have no simple answers. They are the questions that drive philosophy, the questions that challenge us to examine our lives, our values, and our society. Socrates believed that a life without questioning was not worth living, and his life was a testament to that belief. Socrates' approach to life teaches us that the journey is more important than the destination. The answers, as he knew, are not found in what we already know, but in our endless journey to discover. It is in the process of questioning, of seeking, of challenging our own understanding that we grow and learn. Socrates showed us that wisdom is not a final state to be achieved, but a continuous pursuit, one that requires humility, courage, and a deep love of truth. Today, Socrates' influence can be seen everywhere, in the way we think, the way we learn, and the way we approach the world. His spirit of inquiry has become a part of our intellectual heritage, shaping the way we explore ideas and solve problems. In every debate, in every discussion, in every moment of reflection, Socrates' legacy lives on. He taught us that knowledge is not just about gathering information, but about understanding. It is about seeing connections, questioning assumptions, and thinking critically about the world around us. Socrates showed us that true knowledge requires us to question everything, to doubt what we think we know, and to be open to new perspectives. His life also teaches us about the importance of community and dialogue. Socrates believed that the best way to explore ideas was through conversation, through engaging with others and challenging each other's thoughts. He showed us that wisdom is not something we achieve alone, but something we develop together through dialogue and shared exploration. As we reflect on Socrates' life, we are reminded of the value of persistence and resilience. Socrates faced opposition, criticism, and ultimately, death. But he never wavered in his commitment to the pursuit of truth. He showed us that the path of questioning is not always easy, but it is always worthwhile. His courage in the face of adversity inspires us to stand up for what we believe in, to continue seeking the truth, even when it is difficult. Socrates' legacy is also a call to action. It challenges us to live with integrity, to be true to our values, and to engage with the world in a meaningful way. It asks us to take responsibility for our own beliefs, to examine our own lives, and to strive to live in accordance with our deepest principles. In the end, Socrates' life is a story of the human spirit, its capacity for growth, for understanding, for wisdom. It is a story that teaches us about the importance of asking questions, of seeking truth, and of living a life of purpose. Socrates showed us that the pursuit of knowledge is not just an intellectual exercise, but a way of life, a life dedicated to the endless journey of discovery. And so, the legacy of Socrates endures. It endures in every question we ask, in every truth we seek, in every step we take toward a deeper understanding of ourselves and the world around us. His life and his ideas continue to inspire, to challenge, and to guide us as we navigate the complexities of our own lives. Socrates, the eternal questioner, remains a beacon for all who seek wisdom, who dare to question, who strive to live a life of meaning and purpose. His story is not just a story of the past, but a story of the present, a story that continues to unfold in the lives of those who follow his example, who continue the journey he began so long ago. As we close the chapter on Socrates' life, we open the door to our own journey of discovery. The questions he posed are still with us, waiting for us to explore, to challenge, to understand. And in that journey, we find the true legacy of Socrates, the enduring power of the human mind to seek, to question, and to grow. The story of Socrates is not just the story of one man. It is the story of all who seek the truth, who live with courage, who question the world around them. And in that story, we find the inspiration to continue our own quest for wisdom, for understanding, and for a life well lived.